The sound of shattering glass echoed through the Silver Dollar Saloon as Beatrice Vaughan ducked behind the bar, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. It was 1878 in Willow Creek, Colorado, and the past 3 months of her life had spiraled into a nightmare she couldn't escape. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, she was supposed to run. "Where's that pretty new girl?" a drunken voice bellowed. "Promised us a dance, she did." Beatrice pressed her back against the rough wooden panels of the bar, her trembling hands gathering the folds of her emerald green dress. She'd been forced to wear it tonight, too tight around the waist, too low across the bodice. Another indignity in an endless series since Victor Blackwell had purchased her father's debt. "Find her," another voice joined in. "Paid good money to see that dance." Heavy footsteps approached the bar. Beatrice held her breath, feeling tears sting her eyes. At 22, she had never imagined her life would come to this, hiding in saloons, trying to escape men who believed they owned her time, her body, her very existence. "She ain't back here, boys," the bartender's gruff voice came from above. "Probably slipped out the back. You know these dancing girls flighty as sparrows." A chorus of disappointed groans followed, then the shuffle of boots moving away. Beatrice exhaled slowly, shooting a grateful glance upward toward her unexpected ally. The back door of the saloon creaked open, letting in a sliver of moonlight. A silhouette appeared tall, broad-shouldered, the unmistakable outline of a cowboy hat atop his head. "Miss Vaughan!" The voice was low, controlled. "Time to go. Now." Beatrice hesitated only a moment before scrambling toward the door. She didn't know this man, but anyone was better than remaining here, waiting for Blackwell's men to drag her onto that stage. The cool night air hit her face as she slipped outside, finding herself face to face with the stranger. In the pale moonlight, she could make out sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Nathan Quinn," he said simply, tipping his hat. "Your brother sent me." Relief flooded through her. "Benjamin, he's alive." "Very much so, madam, but we need to move. Blackwell's men aren't known for giving up easy." As if on cue, a shout came from inside the saloon. Their absence had been discovered. Nathan Quinn took her elbow gently but firmly, guiding her toward 2 horses waiting in the shadows. "Can you ride astride?" Beatrice nodded. Her father had taught her to ride properly, not side saddle as town ladies did, one of many skills that had scandalized her mother. "Good. We've got ground to cover." He helped her mount a chestnut mare, then swung easily onto his own horse, a powerful black stallion that pawed at the ground impatiently. Just as they turned to leave, the saloon's back door burst open. 3 men stumbled out, led by Emmett Reeves, Blackwell's most vicious enforcer. "There she is," Reeves shouted, drawing his pistol. "Stop right there, Quinn. That woman belongs to Mr. Blackwell." Nathan's response came with quiet authority, his hand moving to rest on his own holstered gun. "Not her, not ever." The declaration hung in the night air for a heartbeat before chaos erupted. Reeves fired, the bullet whistling past Beatrice's ear. Nathan drew and returned fire in one fluid motion. Reeves clutched his shoulder with a howl of pain as Nathan spurred his horse forward. "Ride," he commanded, and Beatrice didn't hesitate. They thundered through the back alleys of Willow Creek, past startled townspeople and barking dogs. Beatrice's heart hammered in her chest, her knuckles white as she gripped the reins. Behind them came shouts and the sounds of pursuit, but Nathan led them on a winding path that seemed calculated to confuse their followers. The town soon fell away, replaced by the open plains that stretched toward the distant mountains. Only when the lights of Willow Creek had vanished behind them did Nathan slow their pace to a steady trot. "We need to keep moving through the night," he explained, scanning the horizon. "Put as much distance between us and Blackwell as possible." Beatrice nodded, trying to calm her breathing. "My brother, where is he? Why didn't he come himself?" A shadow crossed Nathan's face. Benjamin's recovering. Blackwell's men caught up to him about a week ago. He's safe now, but in no condition to ride. Fear clutched at Beatrice's heart. How badly is he hurt? He'll heal, Nathan assured her. Took 2 bullets trying to get back to you after he learned what Blackwell was planning. Man's got more courage than sense, riding in alone like that. That sounds like Benjamin, Beatrice said softly. Her brother had always been her protector. Ever since they were children, after their parents died of fever 3 years ago, they'd only had each other. Nathan's eyes softened as he looked at her. He told me what happened, about your father's debt, and Blackwell buying it up. Shame washed over Beatrice. We didn't know. Father never told us how bad things had gotten after the mine flooded. She trailed off, remembering the day they'd discovered just how deep in debt they truly were. You don't need to explain, Nathan said firmly. What Blackwell's doing, forcing women to work in his saloons, making them dance for men, it's not right. You're not property to be traded for a debt. His words warmed something inside her that had gone cold months ago. Thank you for helping us. Benjamin saved my life once, Nathan replied simply. I owe him. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of hoofbeats and the occasional cry of a night bird, the only interruptions. Beatrice studied her rescuer in the moonlight. Nathan Quinn was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 27 or 28. His face bore the weathered look of a man who lived outdoors, and a thin scar ran along his jawline. He rode with the easy confidence of someone who had spent his life on horseback. Where are we going? She finally asked. There's a ranch about 40 miles north of here. Belongs to a friend of mine. We'll be safe there while we figure out our next move. And after that? Nathan glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. That depends on what you and your brother want. Some folks in your situation head west to California or Oregon. New start, new names. The thought of leaving Colorado, the only home she'd ever known, sent a pang through Beatrice's heart. But what choice did they have? Victor Blackwell was one of the most powerful men in the territory. His influence stretched from Denver to the borders. Benjamin wants to clear our name, she said. Prove that father's debt was inflated by Blackwell. Nathan nodded slowly. That would take evidence, and facing Blackwell in court wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is, Beatrice replied, straightening her back despite her exhaustion. A ghost of a smile touched Nathan's lips. Your brother said you were stubborn. Determined, she corrected, returning his smile with a small one of her own. They continued riding through the night, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and drink from Nathan's canteen. By the time dawn broke over the eastern plains, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Beatrice was swaying in the saddle with fatigue. Not much further, Nathan assured her, his own voice rough with tiredness. True to his word, they crested a hill an hour later to see a modest ranch nestled in a valley below. A small house, a barn, and several corrals spread out near a creek lined with cottonwoods. Smoke rose lazily from the chimney, and Beatrice could make out figures moving around the yard. Welcome to Cottonwood Ranch, Nathan said. It's not much, but it's safe. As they approached, a man emerged from the barn, shading his eyes against the morning sun. He was older, with silver streaking his dark hair and beard. Quinn, the man called out, starting to think you weren't coming back. Nathan raised a hand in greeting. Got delayed in town, Samuel. Brought company. Samuel's gaze shifted to Beatrice, his eyebrows rising slightly. The sister, I presume. Mr. Blackwell's men were closing in, Nathan explained as they reached the yard. Couldn't wait for the original plan. Samuel nodded, his expression grim. Well, you're here now. Let's get you both inside. The lady looks about ready to fall from that saddle. Beatrice wanted to protest, but exhaustion had settled into her bones like lead. When Nathan dismounted and came to help her down, her legs buckled beneath her. Strong arms caught her before she could fall. Easy, Nathan murmured, concern evident in his voice. You've had a long night. He lifted her as though she weighed nothing, carrying her toward the house while Samuel took charge of the horses. Beatrice wanted to insist she could walk, but the warmth of his chest against her cheek and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat were oddly comforting. Her eyelids grew impossibly heavy. "Rest now," she heard Nathan say softly. "You're safe." For the first time in months, Beatrice believed it might be true. When she awoke, the sun was high in the sky. Beatrice found herself in a small but clean bedroom, tucked beneath a patchwork quilt. Someone had removed her boots but left her dressed otherwise. On a chair beside the bed lay a set of clothes, a simple blouse and skirt that looked well worn but clean. As she sat up, the door opened slightly, and a woman's face appeared. She was perhaps 50, with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair tied back in a practical bun. "Ah, you're awake," the woman said, smiling as she entered. "I'm Martha Collins, Samuel's wife. Thought you might be hungry." She carried a tray with a steaming bowl of stew and a chunk of bread. The aroma made Beatrice's stomach growl audibly. Martha laughed. "Nathan said you hadn't eaten since yesterday. Go on, don't stand on ceremony." "Thank you," Beatrice said, accepting the tray, "for all of this." "No need for thanks. Any friend of Nathan's is welcome here." Martha gestured to the clothes. "Thought you might want something more comfortable. That dress looks like it's seen better days." Beatrice glanced down at her crumpled green dress, now spotted with dust and sweat from their escape. "It wasn't my choice," she said quietly. Understanding passed over Martha's face. "Well, those clothes are yours to keep. They belong to our daughter. She's married now, living in Denver." After Martha left, Beatrice ate ravenously, then changed into the offered clothing. The blouse and skirt were simple, but fit her well enough, and the freedom of movement after months in restrictive saloon dresses felt like a luxury. When she ventured out of the bedroom, she found herself in a modest but well-kept home. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace and sturdy wooden furniture. Through the window, she could see corrals containing horses and the rolling grassland beyond. "There she is," Samuel greeted her from the table, where he sat with Nathan and Martha. "Feeling better, Miss Vaughan?" "Much, thank you," Beatrice replied. Her eyes found Nathan, who had stood when she entered. He'd cleaned up as well, his hair still damp from washing, wearing a fresh shirt though the same worn leather vest. "Your brother will be glad to know you're safe," Nathan said. "Samuel's going to ride out to check on him this afternoon." "Can I go?" Beatrice asked eagerly. "I need to see him." The three exchanged glances. "It's not safe yet," Nathan explained gently. "Blackwell's men will be searching everywhere for you. Benjamin is hidden well, but every person who visits increases the risk of discovery." Disappointment must have shown on her face because Nathan added, "Give it a few days, let things cool down in town, then we'll arrange for your reunion." Reluctantly, Beatrice nodded. "At least tell him I'm all right, and that I'm grateful for all he's done." Samuel rose, gathering his hat. "I'll tell him. Don't you worry, miss, your brother's a tough one." After Samuel departed, Martha insisted on showing Beatrice around the ranch. Nathan accompanied them, explaining that he had been working for the Collins family for the past 2 years. "Nathan's more than just a hired hand," Martha added. "Without him, Samuel would have lost this place to the railroad men last year." Nathan looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Just did what anyone would do." "Not anyone," Martha corrected firmly. "Most men would have taken the railroad's money and disappeared." As they walked toward the corral, Beatrice asked, "What happened with the railroad?" Martha gestured toward the distant hills. "They want to run tracks through our land right through the best grazing pasture. Offered to buy us out, but this ranch has been in Samuel's family for 30 years. When we refused, they started making trouble." "What kind of trouble?" Beatrice asked. "First, it was threats," Nathan answered, his jaw tightening. "Then cattle started disappearing. Water sources got fouled mysteriously. Finally, they sent men to burn down the barn. That's when Nathan stepped in," Martha continued, "caught them in the act and stood his ground, 1 against 4. Nathan shrugged, but Beatrice didn't miss the hard glint in his eyes at the memory. They weren't expecting resistance, scared them off. And got shot for his troubles, Martha added. Just grazed, Nathan protested. Martha snorted. A bullet through your shoulder is more than a graze, young man. Beatrice studied Nathan with new appreciation. His quiet confidence made more sense now. This was a man who stood by his principles, even when outnumbered. The railroad men backed off after that, she asked. For now, Nathan replied. They're busy with other stretches of track, but they'll be back eventually. They reached the corral, where several horses grazed peacefully. Nathan whistled softly, and the black stallion he'd ridden last night lifted its head and trotted over. This is Midnight, he said, stroking the horse's nose. Raised him from a colt. The powerful animal nuzzled against Nathan's shoulder affectionately. Watching them, Beatrice felt a strange ache in her chest. It had been so long since she'd experienced such simple, uncomplicated affection. Here, Nathan said, noticing her expression, and he reached into his pocket and pulled out an apple, offering it to her. He's gentle enough if you approach him right. Beatrice took the apple cautiously. I haven't been around horses much lately, she admitted. Just hold your hand flat, Nathan instructed, moving to stand beside her. His presence at her shoulder was reassuring as Midnight approached. The stallion's lips tickled her palm as he took the apple, making Beatrice laugh despite herself. It felt good to laugh a release of tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. He likes you, Nathan observed, a smile warming his usually serious face. Smart horse, Martha commented with a knowing look that made Beatrice blush. The rest of the day passed peacefully. Beatrice helped Martha prepare dinner while Nathan and a ranch hand named Thomas worked with the horses. The normalcy of it was both strange and comforting after months of living in fear at the Silver Dollar. That evening, as they ate Martha's hearty stew around the kitchen table, Samuel returned with news from Benjamin. Your brother sends his love, he told Beatrice. He's healing well, though still weak from blood loss. The doctor says another week of rest before he should travel. Where is he? Beatrice asked. Staying with a friend of mine, a widow who lives outside town. Nobody would think to look for him there. And Blackwell's men? Nathan asked, his expression serious. Samuel's face darkened. They're stirring up trouble in Willow Creek, questioning everyone, offering rewards for information on your whereabouts. Blackwell himself arrived from Denver today. Beatrice felt a chill run through her. Victor Blackwell rarely left Denver, preferring to manage his various enterprises through underlings. If he had come personally, it meant he considered her escape a serious affront. He's put a $500 bounty on both your heads, Samuel continued grimly. Wanted alive, of course. Of course, Nathan muttered. Can't make money off us otherwise. There's more, Samuel said, glancing at Beatrice. He's claiming Benjamin stole from him. Says you two ran off with a significant sum from the saloon safe. That's a lie, Beatrice exclaimed, anger flaring hot in her chest. Benjamin would never steal. We know that, Martha soothed, placing a hand over Beatrice's. But it gives Blackwell legal cover for hunting you down, makes the sheriff more likely to help him. Nathan leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. This changes things. We can't just wait for Benjamin to heal and then disappear. Not with theft accusations hanging over your heads. What can we do? Beatrice asked, looking around the table. We need evidence of Blackwell's real business, Nathan said slowly. Proof that he's forcing women to work off debts he's deliberately inflated. The territorial governor is an honest man. With evidence, he might intervene. And where would we get such evidence? Samuel asked skeptically. Nathan's eyes met Beatrice's. Blackwell keeps records. Benjamin mentioned seeing ledgers in his office at the Denver hotel. You're not suggesting we break into Blackwell's office? Beatrice asked, though a part of her thrilled at the idea of fighting back rather than simply running. Not we, Nathan corrected. Me. You're staying safely hidden. No, Beatrice said firmly. This is my fight too. I know what those ledgers look like. I've seen them when Blackwell was calculating my father's so-called debt. And I know the layout of his hotel suite. You don't. Nathan started to object, but Samuel interrupted. She has a point, Quinn. You can't just walk into Victor Blackwell's private quarters without knowing what you're looking for. A tense silence fell over the table. Finally, Nathan nodded reluctantly. We'll discuss the details later. For now, we all need rest. That night, Beatrice lay awake long after the lamps had been extinguished. Through her window, she could see the vast canopy of stars spread across the Colorado sky. She'd almost forgotten what it was like to look at the stars without bars on the window. A soft knock at her door startled her. Yes? She called quietly. The door opened slightly, and Nathan's silhouette appeared. Sorry to disturb you, he said, his voice low. Saw the light under your door. Thought you might still be awake. Beatrice sat up, pulling the quilt around her shoulders. I can't stop thinking about Benjamin, about all of this. Nathan hesitated, then stepped into the room, though he remained near the door. Your brother's strong. He'll be fine. It's not just that, Beatrice admitted. It's the idea of going after Blackwell. I've spent months being afraid of him, and now you're thinking of fighting back, Nathan finished for her. It's natural to be scared. Are you? Scared, I mean. In the dim light, she saw the corner of his mouth lift. Only a fool wouldn't be. Blackwell's dangerous. But some things are worth the risk. Like helping strangers because of an old debt? Nathan was quiet for a moment. It's not just about the debt, he finally said. What Blackwell's doing, it's wrong. Men like him think they can own people, especially women, treat them like property to be used and discarded. His voice hardened. I've seen it before. Sworn I'd never stand by and let it happen again. There was a story there, Beatrice sensed. Something personal that drove Nathan's determination to help them. But his guarded expression told her now wasn't the time to ask. Thank you, she said instead, for everything you're doing. I know the risks you're taking. Nathan nodded, seeming uncomfortable with her gratitude. Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow we can start planning. He moved to leave, then paused. Beatrice. It was the first time he'd used her first name. Yes? We're going to beat him. I promise you that. With those words, he slipped out, leaving Beatrice staring at the closed door. Despite everything, despite the danger and uncertainty ahead, she believed him. The next few days fell into a rhythm. During the day, Beatrice helped Martha with chores around the ranch, finding a simple pleasure in physical work that left her mind too tired to dwell on fears. In the evenings, she, Nathan, and Samuel would gather around the kitchen table, mapping out their plan to obtain evidence against Blackwell. Denver's a 3-day ride from here, Nathan explained, spreading out a rough map. Blackwell divides his time between his hotel there and the various towns where he has businesses. Like Willow Creek, Beatrice added. Exactly. From what Benjamin learned, Blackwell keeps his most important records in his Denver office, the ledgers that show the real numbers, not the inflated debts he claims people owe him. Samuel traced a finger along the map. Getting to Denver isn't the hard part. It's getting into Blackwell's hotel unnoticed. He'll have men watching for you both. Beatrice had been considering this problem. What if I wasn't recognizable? Nathan raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Blackwell's men are looking for a woman with long auburn hair and green eyes. She touched her hair, which fell in waves past her shoulders. But what if I had short, dark hair instead, and dressed differently? Nathan studied her thoughtfully. It could work, but it's still risky. Everything about this is risky, Beatrice pointed out. But I know Blackwell's routines, his habits. I know when he takes meetings and when he's likely to be away from his office. She's right, Samuel said. And 2 people working together have a better chance than 1 alone. Nathan still looked unconvinced. If anything happened to you? It's my choice, Beatrice interrupted. My freedom at stake. I won't sit safely hidden while others fight my battles. A moment of silent communication passed between them, challenge from her, reluctant admiration from him. All right, Nathan finally agreed, but we do this carefully, plan every detail. Martha, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. I can help with the disguise, and I have some clothes that might work my son's old things. With the right adjustments, she could pass for a young man at a distance. Beatrice's eyes widened. You think I could disguise myself as a man? Martha nodded confidently. With your height and build and the right clothing? From a distance, certainly. Up close, you'd be a very pretty boy, but it might be enough to avoid immediate recognition. The plan began to take shape. Nathan and Beatrice would travel to Denver, posing as brothers looking for work. They would scout Blackwell's hotel, identify the best time to access his office, and obtain the ledgers. Then they would bring the evidence to the territorial governor. 5 days after her escape from Willow Creek, Beatrice stood before a mirror in Martha's bedroom, hardly recognizing herself. Her long auburn hair had been cut short, styled to frame her face in a way that emphasized its angles rather than its softness. She wore trousers, a loose shirt, and a vest that concealed her feminine figure, with boots that added a slight height. Well, Martha asked, standing back to assess her work. It's remarkable, Beatrice admitted, turning to see herself from different angles. Do I really look like a boy? You look like a very young man, Martha corrected. Keep your voice low, your stride confident, and most people won't look twice. When they emerged from the bedroom, Nathan and Samuel were waiting in the main room. Nathan's eyes widened as he took in her transformation, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. Will it work? Beatrice asked nervously. Nathan cleared his throat. Yes, he said, his voice oddly rough. Yes, it will work. Just don't get too close to anyone who might look carefully. Samuel nodded his approval. The key is confidence. Walk like you belong wherever you are, and folks rarely question it. They would leave at dawn the next day. That night, Beatrice found it impossible to sleep, her mind racing with both excitement and fear. She slipped out of the house and walked to the corral, where Midnight and the other horses dozed under the star-filled sky. Couldn't sleep either? Beatrice turned to find Nathan approaching, his familiar silhouette outlined by moonlight. Too much to think about, she admitted. He joined her at the fence, his shoulder almost touching hers. Having second thoughts? No, Beatrice said firmly. But I'm afraid, not just of Blackwell, but of failing, of putting everyone who's helped us in danger for nothing. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Fear's not a bad thing, keeps you sharp, makes you careful. He turned to look at her. But don't let it stop you from doing what's right. Is that what drives you? Doing what's right? The question seemed to catch him off guard. Partly, he admitted, but there's more to it. Beatrice waited, sensing he might share more if she didn't press. Finally, Nathan sighed. I had a sister, Naomi. She was barely 17 when a man like Blackwell came to our town in Kansas. He owned the bank, bought up debts, had a fancy hotel where girls entertained his business associates. A sick feeling grew in Beatrice's stomach as she guessed what was coming. Our father died, leaving debts. This man Monroe was his name. He offered Naomi a job at his hotel, said she could work off the debt in a year, maybe 2. Nathan's voice had gone hard. 6 months later, she was dead. They said it was consumption, but I know better. She took her own life rather than endure one more day of what he made her do. Nathan, I'm so sorry, Beatrice whispered, reaching instinctively for his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused. I was 19, tried to get justice, but Monroe owned the town, the sheriff, the judge, everyone. So I did the only thing I could, made sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. The implication hung in the air between them. You killed him? Beatrice asked softly. Nathan shook his head. wanted to, planned to, but in the end, I couldn't bring myself to become what I hated. Instead, I gathered evidence letters from Naomi, testimony from other girls, took it to a newspaper in Topeka. The story caused enough scandal that officials had to act. Monroe went to prison, but the damage was done. Naomi was still gone. He fell silent, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. That's why this matters so much to you, Beatrice realized. It's not just about Benjamin saving your life. Your situation, it brought it all back, Nathan admitted. When Benjamin told me what Blackwell was forcing you to do, he trailed off, his jaw tight with anger. On impulse, Beatrice stepped closer, resting her head against his shoulder. After a moment's hesitation, his arm came around her, holding her gently. "Thank you for telling me," she said, "and thank you for helping us fight." "We'll win this time," Nathan said, his voice a low rumble she could feel through his chest. "Blackwell won't hurt anyone else when we're done." They stood there under the stars, drawing strength from each other for the battle ahead. When Nathan finally walked her back to the house, something had shifted between them, a deeper understanding, a bond formed in shared purpose and growing affection. Dawn came too quickly. After a hearty breakfast and emotional goodbyes to the Collins, Nathan and Beatrice set out for Denver. They rode side by side, Beatrice on the chestnut mare and Nathan on Midnight, with supplies packed for the 3-day journey. Beatrice's newly short hair felt strange beneath the wide-brimmed hat Martha had given her, but the freedom of movement in her male clothing was a revelation. "Remember," Nathan said as they rode, "your name is Bailey, my younger brother. We're from Wyoming, looking for work after our ranch failed in the drought." Beatrice nodded. "Bailey Quinn, 20 years old, good with horses but not much else." "And keep your voice low," Nathan reminded her. "That'll be the biggest challenge." "Like this?" Beatrice asked, deliberately lowering her pitch. Nathan's mouth twitched. "Better, but still needs work. Practice as we ride." The journey to Denver took them through varied terrain, open grasslands, rocky foothills, and finally the approach to the growing city nestled at the foot of the mountains. They camped under the stars, taking turns keeping watch, though they saw no sign of pursuit. On the second night, as they sat beside their small campfire, Beatrice found herself studying Nathan's profile. In the firelight, the angles of his face were emphasized, the straight nose, the strong jawline, the slight cleft in his chin. He had removed his hat, and his dark hair fell across his forehead in a way that made her fingers itch to brush it back. "Something wrong?" he asked. Catching her gaze, Beatrice felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Just thinking about what happens after all this, if we succeed." Nathan poked at the fire with a stick. "What do you want to happen?" It was a question Beatrice hadn't fully allowed herself to consider. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Before all this, Benjamin and I were planning to sell our father's land, move to a larger town where I could teach. I trained as a teacher, you know, before—" "I didn't know that," Nathan said. "What age did you teach?" "Young children, mostly. I just finished my training when Father died." She smiled at the memory. "I loved it, seeing their faces light up when they understood something new." Nathan watched her across the fire, his expression soft. "You'd make a good teacher, patient but firm." "How would you know that?" Beatrice asked, curious. "Seen you with Martha's grandchildren when they visited. You have a way with them." The observation touched her. It had been so long since anyone had noticed anything about her beyond her appearance. "What about you?" she asked. "What do you want after this?" Nathan was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "Never really looked beyond the next horizon," he finally said. "After Naomi, I drifted. Worked ranches, drove cattle, took odd jobs, nothing permanent. And now?" His eyes met hers across the flames. "Now I'm starting to think permanence might not be so bad, with the right situation." The weight of his gaze sent a flutter through Beatrice's chest. Before she could respond, Nathan stood, breaking the moment. "Better get some rest," he said. "I'll take first watch." Beatrice nodded, retreating to her bedroll with her thoughts in turmoil. She was developing feelings for Nathan Quinn, feelings that went beyond gratitude for his help or admiration for his courage. And unless she was misreading him entirely, he felt something too. But their future remained uncertain. Until Blackwell was dealt with, until her name and Benjamin's were cleared, how could she even consider what might come after? Sleep came eventually, filled with dreams of dancing, not the forced performances at the Silver Dollar, but joyful movement under open skies, with Nathan watching her, smiling. They reached Denver late on the third day, the city sprawling before them in a jumble of buildings, some elegant brick structures, and others hastily constructed wooden affairs that spoke of the city's rapid growth. Coal smoke hung in the air, and the streets bustled with activity despite the approaching evening. "Blackwell's Hotel is on Lawrence Street," Nathan said as they rode through the outskirts. "Grand Palace Hotel. Can't miss it, tallest building on the block with gold trim on the windows." "I remember," Beatrice said grimly. Blackwell had brought her to Denver once, parading her before his business associates like a prize horse. They found lodging at a modest boarding house on the city's edge, where the landlady asked few questions beyond whether they had money to pay. Nathan took a room for himself and his brother, explaining that they were in town looking for work. Once alone in their room, Beatrice collapsed onto one of the two narrow beds, exhaustion washing over her. "We'll rest tonight," Nathan said, checking that the door was securely locked. "Tomorrow we'll scout the hotel, learn the routines." "And Benjamin?" Beatrice asked. "Any word on how he's doing?" "Samuel will send a telegram to a friend here in Denver. We can check for messages tomorrow." They ate a simple meal in the boarding house's dining room, Beatrice carefully maintaining her disguise. She kept her head down, spoke little, and mimicked the mannerisms of the young men around her. Only once did she catch a curious glance from the landlady, but the woman seemed to dismiss whatever suspicion she might have harbored. The next morning, they set out for Blackwell's Hotel. The Grand Palace lived up to its name, a 4-story brick building with elaborate stonework and gold-painted trim. It stood as a testament to Blackwell's wealth and influence, dominating the block where it stood. "His office is on the top floor," Beatrice murmured as they walked past, careful to keep her voice low. "Corner room with windows on two sides." Nathan nodded slightly, his eyes scanning the building's exterior. "Impressive security," he noted. "2 men at the front entrance, probably more inside." They continued past, turning the corner to observe the hotel from another angle. A service entrance at the back was less guarded, but still had a man posted nearby. "Staff coming and going," Nathan observed. "Deliveries, too." They spent the day watching, learning the patterns of activity around the hotel. Deliveries came regularly, food for the restaurant, liquor for the bar, laundry being picked up and returned. Staff changed shifts in the afternoon, with a busy period around 5 o'clock as the night workers arrived. "That might be our best chance," Nathan said as they sat in a small cafe across the street. During the shift change, plenty of confusion, people coming and going. Beatrice nodded, keeping her head down as a group of men entered the cafe. She froze when she recognized one of them, Emmett Reeves, Blackwell's enforcer from Willow Creek. "Don't react," Nathan murmured, noticing her tension. "Keep your face turned away." Reeves and his companions took a table near the door, loudly ordering coffee and pie. Beatrice kept her back to them, heart pounding. "They're talking about us," Nathan said quietly, able to hear their conversation from where he sat. "Still looking. Reeves is angry about his shoulder." Beatrice remembered the shot Nathan had fired during their escape. "Is he saying anything useful?" "Blackwell's in Denver," Nathan confirmed, "holding meetings all day today. Something about a new business venture." This was potentially valuable information. If Blackwell was busy with meetings, his office might be emptier than usual. After what seemed an eternity, Reeves and his men finished their refreshments and left. Beatrice released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was close, she whispered. Nathan nodded grimly. Too close. We need to move quickly. Tonight, if possible. Tonight? Beatrice's eyes widened. But we haven't fully prepared. Reeves being here changes things, Nathan explained. If they're actively searching Denver, our window of opportunity is shrinking. And if Blackwell is occupied with meetings, he had a point. All right, Beatrice agreed. Tonight? But how do we get in? Nathan's eyes tracked a laundry wagon as it pulled away from the hotel's service entrance. I have an idea. That evening, as dusk settled over Denver, Beatrice found herself dressed in a hotel maid's uniform, courtesy of Nathan's persuasive abilities, and a significant amount of cash paid to a laundress. Nathan himself had acquired a hotel porter's jacket and cap. Remember the plan, he said as they approached the service entrance. We go in separately. You head straight for the service stairs. I'll create a distraction on the second floor in 15 minutes, which should draw attention away from the top floor. Beatrice nodded, adjusting the cap that hid her short hair. And if I'm stopped? You're new, filling in for someone who's sick. Keep your head down, act like you belong. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. Beatrice took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. I'll meet you back at the boarding house in 2 hours. If either of us doesn't return. We will, Nathan said firmly. Both of us. His hand brushed hers briefly. Be careful. With those words, he stepped away, circling around to approach the hotel from a different direction. Beatrice watched him go, trying to ignore the knot of fear in her stomach. Then, squaring her shoulders, she walked toward the service entrance, laundry basket in hand. The guard barely glanced at her as she approached, his attention focused on lighting a cigarette. Beatrice kept her head down, murmuring a quiet evening as she passed. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain he must hear it, but he merely grunted in response. Inside, the service area bustled with activity kitchen staff preparing dinner, maids rushing to turn down beds, porters carrying luggage. Beatrice navigated through the chaos, trying to look purposeful as she headed for the stairs. The service stairwell was narrow and dimly lit, used primarily by hotel staff to move between floors without being seen by guests. Beatrice climbed steadily, passing the second floor, then the third. She encountered a few other staff members but kept her face averted, receiving only cursory glances in return. The fourth floor was quieter. This level contained Blackwell's private suite, his office, and a few luxury rooms reserved for his most important associates. Beatrice stepped into the hallway cautiously, her senses alert for any sign of danger. The corridor was empty. Soft carpet muffled her footsteps as she moved toward the corner office. According to the plan, Nathan should be creating his distraction downstairs. Right about now, a minor commotion designed to draw security attention away from the upper floors. Reaching the office door, Beatrice tried the handle. Locked, as expected. From her pocket, she withdrew the small metal tools Nathan had given her, remembering his hasty lesson in lockpicking. It had seemed straightforward enough when he demonstrated, but now, with trembling fingers, the task proved more difficult. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only a minute, the lock clicked. Beatrice glanced up and down the hallway once more, then slipped inside, closing the door behind her. Blackwell's office was exactly as she remembered, opulent, with heavy mahogany furniture, leather-bound books lining the walls, and a large desk positioned to take advantage of the views from both windows. A crystal decanter of amber liquid sat on a silver tray, and the lingering scent of expensive cigars hung in the air. Beatrice moved quickly to the desk. The ledgers would be here somewhere. She began opening drawers, careful to disturb nothing more than necessary. The first contained correspondence, the second various legal documents. In the third, she found what she was looking for, a leather-bound book with the year embossed in gold on the spine. She opened it eagerly. Inside were names, dates, and figures, detailed records of Blackwell's transactions. Flipping through the pages, she found her father's name, confirming what she and Benjamin had suspected. The original debt of $300 had been recorded, then systematically inflated with outrageous interest and fabricated fees until it reached nearly $2,000. There were other names, 24 of them, men and women whose debts had been purchased and manipulated, who had been forced into service at Blackwell's various establishments. Next to some women's names were additional notations that made Beatrice's stomach turn special entertainment, followed by amounts paid by various clients. This was it, the evidence they needed. Beatrice closed the ledger and tucked it into the laundry basket, covering it with linens. She was about to leave when her eye caught something else, a folder labeled Quinn. With a sense of foreboding, she opened it. Inside were several sheets of paper, including wanted posters. Nathan Quinn, wanted in Wyoming Territory for the murder of James Monroe. Beatrice's breath caught. The name matched the man Nathan had spoken of, the one who had exploited his sister. But he had told her he hadn't killed Monroe, that the man had gone to prison. Unless he hadn't told her the whole truth. A noise in the hallway startled her from these thoughts. Voices approaching, one of them unmistakably Blackwell's deep-cultured tones. Beatrice's heart leapt to her throat. There was nowhere to hide except... She darted behind the heavy curtains just as the door opened. "Assure you, Mr. Blackwell, we're doing everything possible to locate them." The voice belonged to Emmett Reeves. "Everything clearly isn't enough," Blackwell replied coldly. "It's been a week, Reeves, a week of a common cowboy and a saloon girl making fools of my men." "We've got leads," Reeves insisted. "Several sightings north of Willow Creek, and we know they had help probably from that rancher Collins." Beatrice bit her lip to keep from gasping. Samuel and Martha could be in danger. "I don't want excuses," Blackwell said. "I want results. The Vaughan girl represents a significant investment, and if Quinn is who I think he is, he's more dangerous than you realize." A pause, then the sound of papers rustling. "This arrived today from Wyoming. Nathan Quinn, wanted for murder 5 years ago, never caught. The description matches our cowboy." "The man who killed James Monroe?" Reeves sounded surprised. "I heard about that case. Monroe was found with a broken neck, but no witnesses." "Monroe is my friend and business partner," Blackwell said, his voice hard. "We had similar enterprises. Quinn disappeared after the murder, but I never forgot his name or his face. When my men reported who helped the Vaughan girl escape, it confirmed my suspicions." Beatrice felt cold all over. Nathan had lied about Monroe, and worse, Blackwell had a personal connection to his former crime. "Double the bounty," Blackwell ordered. "I want Quinn alive. Death would be too merciful for what he did." "And the girl," a pause. "She's still valuable. Bring her back unharmed, her brother too, if possible. And Collins? Make an example of him. Burn the ranch to the ground." The casual cruelty in his voice made Beatrice's blood run cold. She had to warn the Collins family, had to get back to Nathan. "I'll send men tonight," Reeves said. "Should reach the Collins place by tomorrow evening." "Good. Now leave me. I have correspondence to attend to." The door opened and closed. Beatrice remained frozen behind the curtain, hardly daring to breathe. She heard Blackwell moving around the office, the clink of crystal as he poured himself a drink, the creak of leather as he settled into his chair. Minutes ticked by. How long before Nathan would wonder what had happened to her? How long before someone came looking for the maid who had disappeared? Beatrice's legs were beginning to cramp from standing so still, and the laundry basket seemed to grow heavier in her arms. Finally, mercifully, a knock came at the door. "Mr. Blackwell, your dinner reservation is in 30 minutes, sir." "Thank you, Jenkins. I'll be down shortly." More movements, the sound of papers being gathered, then footsteps approaching the door. It opened and closed, and silence fell. Beatrice waited another minute to be certain. Then carefully emerged from behind the curtain. The office was empty. Clutching the precious ledger, she moved swiftly to the door, opened it a crack, and peered out. The hallway was clear. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out, closing the door behind her. She had almost reached the service stairs when a voice called out, "You there, maid!" Beatrice froze, then slowly turned, keeping her face downcast. A hotel manager stood at the end of the hall, frowning. "What are you doing on this floor? Staff aren't permitted up here without specific authorization." "Sorry, sir," Beatrice murmured, keeping her voice as low as possible. "Was told to collect linens from room 412. The man's frown deepened. "There are no guest rooms on this floor requiring service. Who sent you?" Beatrice's mind raced. "Mr. Jenkins, sir. Said it was a special request." The mention of the name she'd heard earlier seemed to give the manager pause. "I see. Well, be quick about it, and in future, check with me before coming to this floor." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." Heart pounding, Beatrice hurried to the stairs and began her descent. She had just reached the third floor when commotion erupted below. Shouts, running footsteps, the crash of something breaking. Nathan's distraction, only it seemed to be escalating beyond what they'd planned. Beatrice hesitated, torn between continuing down to help him or finding another way out. The decision was made for her when two security men appeared at the bottom of the stairwell, looking up. Beatrice turned and ran back up to the fourth floor, then down a different corridor, searching for another way down. She found a guest staircase at the far end and took it, descending as quickly as she dared, while still maintaining the appearance of a maid going about her duties. The second floor was chaotic. Guests and staff gathered around something Beatrice couldn't see, voices raised in alarm. She skirted the edge of the crowd, clutching her laundry basket tight against her chest. Through a gap in the onlookers, she caught a glimpse of Nathan being restrained by two large men, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Something passed between them, understanding, regret, determination. Then Nathan did something unexpected. He broke free of his captors with a sudden surge of strength and charged toward the crowd, creating even more confusion. "Fire!" he shouted. "Fire in the kitchen!" The effect was immediate. Guests panicked, rushing toward the exits. Staff scrambled to maintain order. In the chaos, Beatrice saw her opportunity. She joined the stream of people heading for the main staircase, keeping her head down. Outside, the street was filling with confused hotel guests and curious onlookers. Beatrice pushed through the crowd, moving away from the hotel as quickly as possible without drawing attention. Once she'd put several blocks between herself and the Grand Palace, she ducked into an alley to catch her breath and think. Nathan had been captured. The ledger was secure in her basket, and Blackwell's men were planning to attack the Collins Ranch tomorrow. She needed help, but who could she trust in a city where Blackwell held so much influence? The boarding house was likely being watched by now. Benjamin was miles away and still recovering from his wounds. As darkness fell over Denver, Beatrice Vaughan found herself truly alone for the first time since her escape from Willow Creek. After careful consideration, Beatrice made her decision. She couldn't abandon Nathan, but neither could she risk losing the evidence they'd fought so hard to obtain. She needed to get word to Samuel and Martha about the impending attack, and she needed allies to help free Nathan. There was only one place to turn the newspaper Nathan had mentioned. If his story about exposing Monroe had been true, perhaps the press would help again. The Denver Chronicle offices were closed for the night, but a light burned in a back window. Beatrice approached cautiously, still in her maid's uniform with the precious ledger hidden in her basket. She knocked on the back door, praying someone sympathetic would answer. The door opened to reveal a middle-aged man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He frowned at the sight of her. "We're closed, miss. Come back tomorrow if you have a story to sell." "Please," Beatrice said urgently, dropping the deeper voice she had maintained all day. "I need help. It's about Victor Blackwell." The man's expression changed subtly. "What about him?" "I have evidence of his crimes, and a friend who helped me get it has been captured. Blackwell will kill him if we don't act quickly." The editor studied her for a long moment, then stepped back. "Come inside, quickly." His name was Howard Grant, and he had been with the Chronicle for 15 years. As Beatrice explained her situation, leaving out certain details about Nathan's past, his expression grew increasingly grave. "We've tried to investigate Blackwell before," he admitted, "but witnesses disappear, evidence vanishes, and suddenly our funding is threatened. He has powerful friends." "But this is different," Beatrice insisted, opening the ledger. "It's all here in his own handwriting. The debt manipulation, the women forced into service. Everything." Grant examined the ledger carefully, his eyes widening as he grasped the implications. "This is substantial," he admitted. "But even with this evidence, the law moves slowly. Your friend may not have that much time." "Then help me get him out," Beatrice pleaded. "And I need to warn the Collins family. Blackwell is sending men to burn their ranch tomorrow." Grant rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I have a friend at the telegraph office who owes me a favor. We can get a message to the Collins ranch tonight." He glanced at the ledger again. "As for your friend, that's more complicated. Where would they be keeping him?" "Probably at the hotel," Beatrice guessed. "Blackwell would want to question him personally." "Then breaking him out would be nearly impossible without help." Grant hesitated. "There is someone who might assist us, a former lawman named Marshall Davis. He's had his own run-ins with Blackwell. Lives just outside town now." Hope flickered in Beatrice's chest. "Can you take me to him?" Grant nodded slowly. "I'll do better than that. I'll send the telegraph and then bring him here. But first—" He gestured to her maid's uniform. "Let's find you something less conspicuous to wear." An hour later, dressed in borrowed clothes that better suited a lady journalist, Beatrice waited anxiously in Grant's office. He had sent the urgent warning to the Collins ranch and gone to fetch the former lawman. When they returned, Beatrice found herself facing a weathered man in his 50s, with silver hair and a thick mustache. Despite his age, Marshall Davis moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent a lifetime relying on his physical abilities. "So you're the girl Blackwell's been hunting," he said, assessing her with keen eyes. "Yes, sir. And I need your help." Davis listened carefully as she explained about Nathan's capture and the evidence they had obtained. When she finished, he nodded thoughtfully. "Grant's shown me the ledger. It's damning all right, enough to put Blackwell away for years if it reaches the right hands." He fixed her with a steady gaze. "But you should know breaking a man out of Blackwell's custody isn't just difficult. It's dangerous. People could die, including your friend and yourself." "I understand the risks," Beatrice said firmly, "but I can't leave him there, not after everything he's done for me, and not knowing what Blackwell plans for him." Davis studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. "You've got grit, I'll give you that. All right, I'll help. But we do this my way." Relief flooded through Beatrice. "Thank you. What's your plan?" "First, we need to confirm where they're holding him. I have contacts who can get that information." Davis turned to Grant. "Howard, I need you to take the ledger to Judge Wilson tonight. He's one of the few honest judges in Denver, and he's no friend to Blackwell. With this evidence, he might issue warrants immediately." Grant nodded. "I'll go now." "Meanwhile," Davis continued, turning back to Beatrice, "you and I need to prepare for a rescue operation, but I need to know everything, including what you haven't told us about your friend Nathan Quinn." Beatrice tensed. "What do you mean?" "I was a marshal for 20 years, Miss Vaughan. I recognize a wanted man's name when I hear it. Nathan Quinn is wanted for murder in Wyoming territory." After a moment's hesitation, Beatrice decided honesty was her only option. "He killed a man named James Monroe, a man who drove Nathan's sister to suicide after forcing her into the same situation I was in. But he never told me he had actually killed him." Davis sighed. "I remember the case. Monroe was a piece of work nearly as bad as Blackwell. The general feeling among honest lawmen was that whoever broke his neck did the territory a favor." He shook his head. "But the law is the law. Quinn will have to answer for that eventually. First, we need to get him away from Blackwell, Beatrice insisted. Agreed. Davis stood. Let's get to work. Through Davis's contacts, they learned that Nathan was indeed being held at the Grand Palace Hotel in a secure room in the basement used for storage. Blackwell planned to transport him to his private residence outside Denver the following morning for questioning. Their plan took shape quickly. Davis would pose as a wealthy businessman staying at the hotel, creating a distraction at the front desk. Grant's assistant, a young man named Thomas, would trigger the fire alarm. In the ensuing chaos, Beatrice and Davis would make their way to the basement and free Nathan. "It's risky," Davis warned as they went over the details one final time. "If anything goes wrong, get out. The ledger is safe with Judge Wilson now. That's the most important thing." Beatrice shook her head firmly. "Not without Nathan." Davis gave her a long look. "You care for him a great deal, don't you?" "I do," Beatrice admitted, surprising herself with the simple truth of it. Somewhere between her rescue from the silver dollar and now, Nathan Quinn had become essential to her. "More than I should, perhaps." Davis's expression softened. "The heart wants what it wants, miss. Even when it's complicated." The rescue was set for midnight, late enough for most guests to be asleep, but before Blackwell's men would be expecting any attempt. Dressed once more as a hotel maid, with Davis in an expensive suit borrowed from Grant, Beatrice approached the Grand Palace Hotel with her heart in her throat. They entered separately. Davis went first, checking in as a late-arriving guest, making a show of his impatience and importance. Beatrice slipped in through the service entrance, nodding confidently to the same guard who had admitted her earlier. This time, instead of going up, she found the service stairs leading down to the basement. The basement level was dimly lit and labyrinthine, with multiple storage rooms and service areas. Beatrice moved cautiously, listening for any sign of guards. According to Davis's information, Nathan was being held in a wine storage room at the far end. She had just rounded a corner when she nearly collided with a man in a hotel uniform. He frowned, looking her up and down. "You're not supposed to be down here," he said suspiciously. Before Beatrice could respond, the fire alarm began to ring, Thomas's distraction right on schedule. The man's head jerked up. "Fire! Damn it!" He looked back at Beatrice. "Get upstairs and help with the guests." He rushed past her toward the stairs. Beatrice waited until he was out of sight, then hurried deeper into the basement. Above, she could hear the commotion as hotel staff began evacuating guests. At the end of a long corridor, she found the wine storage room. Its door was heavy wood, secured with a padlock. Beatrice's heart sank. They hadn't anticipated a lock. Davis had the tools to pick it, but he was still upstairs. From inside, she heard a muffled sound. "Nathan?" she called softly, pressing close to the door. "Beatrice." His voice was strained but unmistakable. "Is that you?" "Yes, I'm here to get you out, but there's a lock." "Check the guard," Nathan suggested urgently. "He should have keys." Beatrice looked around frantically. "What guard?" "There's been one stationed outside all night." Fear shot through her. If a guard was assigned to this door, where was he now? Had he simply left at the sound of the fire alarm, or the answer came in the form of a hand clamping over her mouth from behind? "Well, well," Emmett Reeves's voice hissed in her ear. "Look who's come back." Beatrice struggled against his grip, but Reeves was strong, his arm like iron around her waist. "Stop squirming," he ordered. "Blackwell will be mighty pleased to have you back." "Let her go, Reeves." Davis's voice came from behind them, hard and commanding. Reeves spun around, keeping Beatrice as a shield between himself and Davis. The former marshal stood at the end of the corridor, a revolver aimed steadily at them. "Marshal Davis," Reeves said, recognition in his voice. "Heard you retired. Didn't expect to see you mixed up in this." "I have a problem with men who force women into servitude," Davis replied evenly. "Now let the lady go, and we can all walk away from this." Reeves laughed harshly. "That's not how this works, old man. I've got the girl, and Blackwell wants her. You're outnumbered and outgunned." As if to emphasize his point, two more of Blackwell's men appeared behind Davis, their weapons drawn. "Maybe," Davis admitted, "but I've got something you don't know about." He glanced upward meaningfully. At that moment, the sprinkler system activated, drenching everyone in cold water. The unexpected deluge startled Reeves enough for his grip to loosen. Beatrice seized the opportunity, driving her elbow hard into his stomach. He doubled over, and she broke free. Davis fired at one of the other men, hitting him in the leg. The second man took cover, returning fire. Beatrice ducked behind a stack of crates as bullets splintered the wood around her. "The keys!" she shouted to Davis over the gunfire. "We need the keys to the room." Davis nodded, advancing on the wounded man while firing at the second to keep him pinned down. He reached the fallen guard and searched him quickly, producing a ring of keys. With a powerful throw, he sent them skidding across the wet floor toward Beatrice. She lunged for them, narrowly avoiding another shot from the second guard. Keys in hand, she scrambled to the storage room door, trying key after key with trembling fingers while water continued to pour from above. Behind her, the gunfight continued. Davis had taken cover, exchanging shots with the remaining guard. Reeves had recovered and was moving toward Beatrice, his face contorted with rage. Finally, a key turned in the lock. Beatrice wrenched the padlock free and threw open the door to find Nathan inside, his hands bound behind his back, face bruised and bloody but his eyes alert and relieved. "Behind you," he warned. Beatrice spun around just as Reeves reached for her. Without thinking, she swung the heavy padlock at his head. It connected with a sickening thud, and Reeves crumpled to the floor. She rushed to Nathan, using a small knife from her pocket to cut his bonds. "Can you walk?" "I'll manage," he assured her, though she could see the pain in his eyes as he stood. "How did you find me?" "Later," she promised. "We need to get out of here." Davis appeared in the doorway. "This way, quickly! The real fire brigade will be here any minute." Supporting Nathan between them, they made their way through the maze of corridors, following Davis's lead. They emerged not through the main hotel, but through a service tunnel that connected to the adjacent building. Outside, the street was in chaos, hotel guests huddled in nightclothes, fire wagons arriving, policemen attempting to maintain order. Under cover of this confusion, they slipped away, making their way back to the Chronicle offices where Grant waited with a doctor he trusted. As the doctor treated Nathan's injuries, cracked ribs, various cuts and bruises, but nothing life-threatening, Beatrice explained everything that had happened since their separation at the hotel. "The ledger is with Judge Wilson now," she concluded, "and Grant has sent warnings to the Collins Ranch about Blackwell's planned attack." Nathan shook his head in amazement. "You did all this in one night?" "She's quite remarkable," Davis commented from where he stood by the window, keeping watch. "Brave as they come." Nathan's eyes found Beatrice's. "I've known that since the moment I met her." The intensity of his gaze made her blush. There was so much still unresolved between them, including the truth about James Monroe. "Nathan," she began hesitantly, "in Blackwell's office I found a file about you, about what happened in Wyoming." His expression darkened. "I should have told you the full truth. I'm sorry." "Why didn't you?" Nathan sighed, wincing as the movement pained his ribs. "I've spent 5 years running from what I did, not because I regret that Monroe is dead, but because I crossed a line I swore I never would." He met her eyes directly. "I went there planning to expose him, just as I told you. But when I saw him, heard him laughing about my sister and the other girls he'd destroyed, something in me snapped." Beatrice took his hand gently. "I understand, truly. Do you?" His voice was rough with emotion. "Because I've been running so long, I'm not sure I know how to stop, or if I deserve to." Before she could respond, Grant burst into the room, his face alight with excitement. "It worked! Judge Wilson has issued arrest warrants for Blackwell and his associates based on the evidence in the ledger. The territorial marshals are assembling now to execute them." A wave of relief washed over Beatrice. So it's over? Blackwell will be arrested? By dawn, if all goes well, Grant confirmed. The marshals are moving on his hotel suite first, then his residence. The Chronicle's morning edition will break the full story. Davis moved away from the window, nodding in satisfaction. Good. But we're not out of danger yet. Blackwell still has men throughout the city who won't take kindly to his arrest. We should move somewhere safer until it's done. I have a place, Grant offered, a cabin outside town that the paper uses for retreats. It's isolated, hard to find if you don't know it's there. And so, as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Beatrice found herself in a buckboard wagon beside Nathan, with Davis driving them out of Denver toward the foothills. Grant had stayed behind to oversee the newspaper's coverage of Blackwell's downfall. In the wagon bed behind them, cushioned by blankets, lay the telegraph that had arrived just before they left. Message received. Stop ranch defended. Stop Blackwell men repelled with help from neighbors. Stop all safe here. Stop Samuel Collins. They're safe, Beatrice said softly, relief evident in her voice. The Collins family is safe. Nathan nodded, his face tight with pain despite the laudanum the doctor had administered. Good people. Deserve better than getting caught up in my troubles. Our troubles, Beatrice corrected gently, and they helped because they wanted to, because they believe in doing what's right. Nathan was quiet for a moment, watching the city recede behind them. What happens now, Beatrice, after all this is over? It was the question that had been hovering between them, unasked until now. I don't know, she admitted. I still need to reunite with Benjamin. And you. And I'm still wanted for murder, he finished for her. Davis, overhearing from his position at the reins, spoke without turning. There might be a way to address that, Quinn. Judge Wilson has influence beyond Colorado territory. With the full story of Monroe's crimes now coming to light through Blackwell's records, and your role in helping bring Blackwell to justice, well, a pardon isn't impossible. Hope flickered in Nathan's eyes, quickly suppressed as though he didn't dare believe it. And if that doesn't happen, then you have choices to make, Davis said simply, as does Miss Vaughan. Beatrice's hand found Nathan's, her fingers intertwining with his. Whatever happens, she said softly, we face it together. The cabin proved to be a rustic but comfortable retreat, nestled among pines with a view of the distant mountains. Davis left them there with supplies and promises to return with news once Blackwell had been apprehended. Alone for the first time since their desperate escape from the hotel, Beatrice and Nathan sat together on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. I keep thinking about something you said back at the Collins ranch, Beatrice said, breaking the comfortable silence, about never looking beyond the next horizon. Nathan nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant peaks. Been that way since Naomi died. Easier to keep moving than to stay in one place and feel the weight of what happened. And now? Beatrice asked, her heart beating a little faster. Are you still looking to the next horizon? He turned to her then, his eyes revealing more than his words ever had. Now I'm thinking maybe the horizon isn't a place to escape to. Maybe it's just where a new day begins. The simple poetry of his words touched something deep within her. Beatrice leaned closer, drawn by the quiet intensity in his gaze. Nathan. Whatever she might have said was interrupted by the distant sound of approaching hoofbeats. They both tensed, Nathan reaching instinctively for his gun despite his injuries. Stay inside, he ordered, standing with difficulty. No, Beatrice refused, rising beside him. Together, remember? They watched as a single rider emerged from the trees. As he drew closer, Beatrice gave a cry of recognition and joy. Benjamin! Her brother reined in his horse before the cabin, his face breaking into a wide smile despite the lingering pallor of his recent injuries. "Beatrice! Thank God!" She ran to him as he dismounted, throwing her arms around him carefully, mindful of the wounds he was still healing from. "How did you find us?" "Davis told me where you were," Benjamin explained, returning her embrace before stepping back to look at her properly. "Your hair," he exclaimed, touching the short ends in wonder. "A necessary disguise," Beatrice laughed. "It will grow back." Benjamin's gaze shifted to Nathan, who had remained on the porch. The two men regarded each other solemnly before Benjamin extended his hand. "I can never thank you enough for keeping her safe." Nathan clasped his hand firmly. "She did as much to keep me safe in the end." Benjamin nodded, unsurprised. "That sounds like my sister." He turned back to Beatrice, his expression becoming serious. "I have news from Denver. Blackwell has been arrested, along with most of his associates. The evidence you obtained was overwhelming." Relief flooded through Beatrice. "So it's truly over." "Not quite everything," Benjamin said, glancing at Nathan. "There's still the matter of Wyoming." Nathan's face hardened slightly. "I understand. I'll turn myself in, face whatever consequences come." "Actually," Benjamin interrupted, "Judge Wilson has been in contact with the governor of Wyoming Territory. Given the circumstances surrounding Monroe's death and your role in bringing down Blackwell's operation, they're considering a conditional pardon." Nathan stared at him in disbelief. "A pardon?" "Conditional on certain terms," Benjamin clarified. "You would need to make a full statement about Monroe's death, and there would be a period of supervised probation, but yes, essentially a pardon." The news seemed to hit Nathan like a physical blow. He sank back onto the porch step, his expression one of stunned disbelief. "After 5 years running, I never thought," Beatrice sat beside him, taking his hand. "A chance to stop running, to start over." "There's more," Benjamin said, smiling at his sister. "Father's debt has been officially cleared, and there's talk of restitution for what Blackwell put you through, both of you. It won't be a fortune, but it would be enough to start fresh somewhere." The possibilities seemed to unfold before them like the landscape spread out from the cabin, vast, full of potential, no longer shrouded in fear. Beatrice found herself imagining a future she hadn't dared consider before: a home, perhaps a small school where she could teach, and Nathan by her side. "I need to return to Denver today," Benjamin continued. "Davis is arranging for Nathan to give his statement to Judge Wilson tomorrow to start the pardon process. You're both welcome to stay here until everything is finalized." After Benjamin departed, promising to return in a few days, Beatrice and Nathan remained on the porch, watching the changing light on the mountains as morning gave way to afternoon. The weight of everything they had been through and everything still ahead settled around them, not as a burden, but as a shared experience that had forged something unbreakable between them. "What will you do?" Nathan asked finally, "when all this is truly over, when you have your freedom and your name is cleared?" Beatrice considered the question carefully. "I still want to teach," she said, "to help children learn and grow. But beyond that," she turned to look at him, "I think it depends on what you plan to do with your freedom." Nathan's eyes held hers, a vulnerability in them she hadn't seen before. "For 5 years I never allowed myself to want anything permanent. A home, a family. Those were dreams for other men, not for someone constantly looking over his shoulder." "And now?" Beatrice asked softly. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of her short hair back from her face. "Now I find myself wanting all of those things. A home, roots, a future." His hand lingered against her cheek. "With you, if you'll have me." The simple honesty of his declaration took her breath away. "Nathan, I know it's fast," he said quickly. "We've only known each other a few weeks, and I understand if you need time or if you—" Beatrice silenced him by leaning forward and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but deepened as Nathan's arms came around her, drawing her closer despite his injured ribs. When they finally parted, Both breathless, Beatrice smiled. "I don't need time," she whispered. "I know what I want, who I want." The days that followed passed in a blur of cautious hope and quiet joy. Nathan traveled to Denver under Davis's protection to give his statement, returning with news that the pardon process was proceeding favorably. Benjamin brought updates on Blackwell's case. The man who had terrorized them for so long would face years in prison, his empire dismantled piece by piece. 2 weeks after the night they had stolen Blackwell's ledger, Beatrice and Nathan stood together on the porch of the Collins ranch, surrounded by friends who had become family. Benjamin was there, fully recovered from his wounds. Samuel and Martha Collins beamed with pride and relief. Even Howard Grant had made the journey from Denver to share in the celebration. "It's official," Benjamin announced, holding up the document that had arrived that morning. "Nathan's pardon has been granted, with the conditions as discussed, and Blackwell has been sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison." A cheer went up from the gathered group. Beatrice squeezed Nathan's hand, feeling his tension finally release at the news. "There's more," Benjamin continued, his eyes twinkling as he looked at his sister. "The restitution has been approved, enough to buy a small property, perhaps start a business or a school," Beatrice finished, her heart soaring at the possibility. Nathan turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "Beatrice Vaughan," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "2 months ago, I made you a promise outside a saloon in Willow Creek. I said, 'Not her, not ever,' when Blackwell's men claimed you belonged to them." She nodded, remembering the moment that had changed everything. "Now I'm making you another promise," Nathan continued. "If you'll have me, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to fear again, that you're free to pursue your dreams, to teach, to build whatever life you want." He paused, his gaze intensely earnest. "I love you, Beatrice. Will you marry me?" The words she had been waiting to hear, spoken with such simple sincerity, brought tears to her eyes. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Nathan Quinn." Their kiss was met with applause and cheers from their friends. When they finally broke apart, Beatrice felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. "I have something for you," Nathan said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a simple gold ring, worn but well cared for. "It was my mother's," he explained. "The only thing of hers I kept with me all these years. I've been carrying it since the day we met, hoping someday I might have the right to offer it to you." As he slipped it onto her finger, Beatrice felt the significance of the moment, not just a promise of marriage, but the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. The circle of gold represented everything they had fought for: freedom, justice, the right to choose their own path. Later that evening, as the celebration continued around them, Beatrice and Nathan slipped away to the corral where Midnight and the chestnut mare, now officially Beatrice's horse, grazed peacefully. "Have you thought about where you want to settle?" Nathan asked, his arm around her waist as they watched the horses. Beatrice leaned into his embrace, considering. "I've always loved the mountains," she said. "Somewhere with space to breathe, but not too far from a town where children need a teacher." Nathan nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "I heard there's land available near Silver Creek, good grazing for horses, close enough to town for a school, but with mountains right on our doorstep." "You'd want to raise horses?" Beatrice asked, remembering how he was with Midnight. "It's what I know best," he admitted. "Besides, every teacher needs a good horse to get to school." The image of it filled her mind. A small house nestled at the foot of the mountains, children arriving for lessons, Nathan working with his horses in the corral. A life built on their own terms, free from fear and constraint. "It sounds perfect," she said softly. Nathan turned her to face him, the setting sun gilding his features and warming his eyes to amber. "You saved me, you know," he said quietly. "Not just from Blackwell, but from myself. From the man I was becoming, always running, never allowing myself to care too deeply about anything or anyone. Beatrice shook her head. We saved each other. And now we can build something together that neither of us could have imagined a few months ago. I love you, Beatrice Vaughan, Nathan said simply. Soon to be Beatrice Quinn. And I love you, Nathan Quinn. She rose on tiptoe to kiss him again, sealing the promise between them. 1 year later, the schoolhouse at Silver Creek was filled with the sound of children's laughter. Beatrice Quinn stood at the front of the one-room building, watching with pride as her students worked diligently on their arithmetic problems. Through the window, she could see the mountains rising majestically in the distance, their peaks still snow-capped despite the spring sunshine. As the school day ended and the children gathered their things, Beatrice caught sight of a familiar figure approaching on horseback. Her heart, still so responsive to the sight of him, quickened its pace. Remember your reading assignments, she called to the departing students, and be prepared to discuss them tomorrow. Nathan dismounted as the last of the children scattered toward home. Midnight snorted and pawed at the ground, as impatient as ever. The bond between man and horse remained undiminished, though Nathan now had a small herd of quality animals that he bred and trained. "How was your day, Mrs. Quinn?" he asked, his smile still sending a thrill through her after a year of marriage. "Wonderful," Beatrice replied, stepping into his embrace. Tommy Williams finally mastered his multiplication tables, and Sarah Johnson wrote a composition that nearly moved me to tears. Nathan's arms tightened around her. "You're a remarkable teacher. This town doesn't know how lucky it is to have you." Their home, a sturdy cabin with a wide porch and a view of the mountains, stood on 10 acres of good land just outside Silver Creek. Benjamin lived in town, running a successful freight business that connected the growing settlement to Denver and beyond. He was courting the daughter of the local doctor, a match that brought Beatrice great joy. "I have news," Nathan said as they rode home together, Beatrice on her chestnut mare that she had named Liberty. A letter came from Marshall Davis. "How is he?" Beatrice asked eagerly. They had maintained correspondence with the former lawman who had helped secure their freedom. "Well, he's been appointed to a position with the territorial governor's office overseeing reforms to the prison system." Nathan's expression grew more serious. He also sent news about Blackwell. Beatrice tensed slightly, though a year had passed. The name still had the power to evoke memories she would rather forget. "He died in prison," Nathan said gently. Apparently some of the men he'd wronged over the years were serving sentences alongside him. Davis didn't provide details, but Beatrice nodded, understanding the implications. "I can't say I'm sorry," she admitted. "Is that wrong of me?" Nathan shook his head. "After what he did to you, to Benjamin, to so many others, I think it's just human." They rode in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. The news brought closure, a final end to the chapter of their lives that had brought them together under such desperate circumstances. As their home came into view, Beatrice was struck anew by the beauty of it, the golden light of late afternoon touching the weathered wood. Smoke curling from the chimney where Martha Collins, visiting for a week, would be preparing dinner. In the corral, young colts frolicked, representing the beginning of Nathan's breeding program. A vegetable garden, Beatrice's pride, flourished beside the house. "I have news too," Beatrice said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Nathan glanced at her curiously. "What kind of news?" She guided Liberty closer to midnight, reaching across to take Nathan's hand. Placing it gently against her stomach, she watched as understanding dawned in his eyes. "Beatrice, are you—" "Yes," she confirmed, her smile widening at the wonder in his expression. "In about 7 months our family will grow by one." Nathan's face transformed with joy. He drew rein, stopping both horses, and leaned across to kiss her tenderly. "A child," he whispered against her lips. "Our child." In that moment, with the sun setting behind the mountains they both loved, Beatrice felt the full measure of their journey from a saloon in Willow Creek to this peaceful homestead, from captivity to freedom, from fear to love. The path had been dangerous, fraught with obstacles that had seemed insurmountable at times, but they had faced them together, and in doing so had forged a bond that nothing could break. "Not her, not ever," Nathan had said that night long ago, refusing to let her be claimed as property. Those words had been the beginning, a declaration of her worth and dignity when she needed it most. Now they had built a life where those words extended to everyone they touched, their students, their neighbors, and soon their child. As they continued toward home, Beatrice offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought Nathan Quinn into her life. The cowboy who had saved her had become the man with whom she would build a future, one day, one dream, one love at a time. And in the glow of the setting sun, liberty and midnight carried them home,